Hello and welcome to another episode of Roll for Lit. And today I thought it would be cool to kind of do a singular kind of, well, technically a double book review. And both of these books kind of are the reason why I was, ranking my favorite slasher reads last week. And that's because on ARCs, on NetGalley, I've recently read a series of two upcoming slasher novels, and I would love to talk about them just because, it's clear that I have a lot of love for the slasher genre, and these books are both books that are worthy to put on your radar for next month. So, starting off, let's talk about Slasher Summer by E.L. Chen. Now, this is a book that's coming out on the 23rd of June, next month. Obviously, it would be weird if it was coming out in June of 2027. But anyways, this is a really, really good slasher novel. And this is a book that's very much a typical slasher story. I will say that this is a bit more slower paced because it takes about 50% for the slasher elements to really, really kick in. So much so that part of me throughout reading this book, there was a part where I was like, this isn't going to be one of those, postmodern books where it's like, whoa, there wasn't a slasher at all. It was all just a misunderstanding and coincidences. But thankfully, no, it is a slasher full on, and a pretty damn good one at that when it really gets rolling. The plot of Slasher Summer is basically this high school friend group who used to have a number of they have like a horror movie club, and that is how all of these disparate people, because they all come from different walks of life and different personality strata in the normal high school ecosystem. And that's how this group of people kind of got together, and they all bonded over horror movies. It has been a number of years since they've all seen each other, and this is them all kind of coming back for a reunion to this cabin. And this cabin is notable because it is where the horror movie that was filmed in their small town was filmed. So this is literally the site of where the film Slasher was, filmed. I will say, I do wish that it had the fake movie of the book had a bit more of a creative name, because Slasher. I mean, technically in the era that they're talking about, because it's like around the 1983-ish era for, when they say that this fake movie was filmed in their hometown. In that era, there were films like called Ripper and stuff like that. So it's not too much of a stretch for there to have been an actual film from the early 80s called Slasher, but I digress. So basically what happens is they're all coming back, meeting up at this cabin, and something is coming back. An element of their past coming to meet them? Or something more nefarious? I mean, slashing is about to happen. And I really like this book. This book has a really good style to it. I've never read any books by E.L. Chen, but knowing that this is a woman author and this is a woman of color author, that is a angle and a avenue that you really do not get in a lot of slashers. A lot of times when you're reading literary slashers or watching slasher movies, it's a very, a white dominated field. Lately we're getting more and more things that are kind of stretching and, expanding upon that. So I just thought it would be worth noting because, that for one, it's worth reading because it is a new perspective on a genre that everyone knows and loves. This is, more of what, like I said, a kind of a straight up slasher. They're all there. Someone's picking them off one by one. Who will be the last one to survive? And what's nice about this film is that, one, I think E.L. Chen has great tastes in slasher movies. The slasher movies that get referenced are the ones that, for me, are, have, a deep place in my heart. Like Friday the 13th Part 3. That's one that people, don't reference as much. Obviously, it's one of the Friday the 13th films, so it's not, an obscure movie. But if you're picking one movie from that oeuvre to, reference, I think it's cool that it is Friday the 13th Part 3, just because I do think that movie has a lot more heart than you would originally kind of see upon first glance, and there's a lot of elements to that is just a great, fun, cheesy slasher movie. And as such, because, considering what type of movies are being referenced, like Scream, classics of that nature, there is a little bit more of a comedic bent to this slasher book. So this is not a book that takes itself super, super seriously, and it has like an interesting style to it where each chapter is written from a different character's perspective in the group, and you kind of, as that goes, get to learn a little bit more about what's under the surface for some of these characters. But what I thought was kind of funny is that there are some characters who I'm like, oh, we're going to find out this deep, rich inner world. And then you get to it, it's like, oh no, she's just like a valley girl. And you're like, oh, okay. That actually is kind of funny, because that is a thing that in this format, the literary format, you'd think that they would get there's secret depths, and it's it's important to remember some people do not have secret depths to them. They are as they appear, and that's not a bad thing. That character is still a really interesting character, and I like her journey. I just thought it was funny how there's not more to her than it appears. You're like, oh, it's actually a person who as they are appearing. That's kind of funny and interesting. And yeah, I just thought this had a really good cast of characters. Again, a little bit of a slow start, but as we're going through there, I was never bored. I was never waiting for things to wrap up. I was always kind of compelled, whoa, what's gonna happen? Who's the killer? Is it this? Is it this? There's a twist. Is it that twist or that? And it kind of had me guessing throughout. And I also did find the kills when they happened to be pretty great and some of them are pretty brutal and pretty visceral. Others are a little bit more funny and comedic, and it's kind of interesting to see how they kind of balance the two. I find that this is definitely one of those ones that is good for you to just have a good time. This also does promise a sequel, which I'm like, ooh, I hope this happens, because I would be interested to see where they leave off this story, where that would go in a future story. So yeah, I would just say that this is a fun, super well-written, enjoyable ride. Don't look, sometimes when you get slashers, you're going to get a dissection of the genre, and there is a little bit of genre dissection here. I don't want to really get into that, because I think that does spoil some of the more, bigger moments in this book. All I will say is it's not completely trying to completely upend the slasher genre. This is just a pretty straightforward, well-told, interesting and exciting slasher novel, and I think that is awesome. It's pretty much exactly how it promises. You're looking at the cover, it has the old VHS logo. Clearly it's kind of going for an old retro vibe to it, and I think that is executed extremely well. So really wanted to recommend that. And then the other book I want to talk about here in this video is The Summer Fun Massacre by Craig DeLuey. Now this is a book that I thought was amazing. I do think that a lot of you are probably not gonna like this book, because I feel like a lot of people are gonna go in expecting one thing, and then when the reality of the book kind of folds out and expands, they're gonna be a little disappointed. And I think that for me, I like being surprised. I like if I pick up a book and it goes a different direction than I think it will, and it does an expansion of what my expectations were, kind of upends it, kind of does something new. Some people, though, they just want what is on the cover and what is being kind of sold beat from marketing to be exactly what is in the book. I'm not one of those people, but if you are one of those people, I do think that it's worth noting that this is a really different type of slasher novel. Now, it does expand upon, sometimes, say The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I don't consider that a pure slasher, even though it is all about final girls and slashers. I just don't believe that book itself is a pure slasher. And it's funny because I will say that Summer Fun Massacre is a true slasher, even though a lot of it is spent away from the action. And the reason why is because this is a book that changes up the lens from which we are being told the story of a slasher. And that lens is from the kind of like Deputy Dewey. Now, this is a book that I mentioned Deputy Dewey only because Craig DeLuey himself references that element of Scream. Again, Scream coming up, the movie by Wes Craven from the 90s. Whoa, wow. But Craig DeLuey in his afterword does mention that like Dewey was kind of an inspiration. But unlike Slasher Summer, this book is taken extremely seriously, and I think that is something that really is effective in the storytelling. But this entire story is told from a kind of like a cop's point of view who is coming in at the tail end of a slasher scenario and then slowly peeling back the elements of what happened that night. What's the history of the town? What is this slasher that is, terrorizing this community? Is there a history that is being suppressed by the other police officers? And what is the true story of what even went on at a slasher 9 years ago? Because what happens is this is a book that takes place in the early 90s, and it's about a new, like, this camp had a slasher incident about 9 years ago where a bunch of kids died at a summer camp. They closed it, and then it recently got reopened, and then something else is happening right now as we open the story that is the culmination of another slasher event. So what happens is the cop who comes in to, investigate and try to save the day, he now starts to peel back the layers of what happened 9 years ago. What is there more to this than has been, appears at first? And the elements of the slasher is very sparse throughout. The book really begins with the slasher, and then it ends at a very slasher-esque moment. And there is quite a few chapters where they're like detailing past events or going into a character's perception of last events that they like past slasher events that they went through. But the majority of this is kind of more of a police procedural where it's peeling back the layers of what would it be like if a slasher incident happened. Like, what would that actually do to a community? How would that affect everyone who lives within it? And how would the world that everyone has kind of like agreed upon, and what would happen if all of that starts to get upended? All these little cracks in the community start to show. All of these elements that are kind of like hidden from society start to come to light. And it is so, so well written. And I think because of the different lens from which we're being told the story, I found that this book really had some scary, scary elements to it where I am so engrossed in what's going on and trying to understand, like, what is going to happen? What is going to happen? I have no idea. Like, and because you are taking the lens from which you are experiencing the story is from a character who in a lot of slasher films can die. So your main character could die. There is a very real sense of danger and of being unnerved by like going like, I do not know where in even a typical slasher story this character would end up. Because, there are plenty of slasher movies where the cops get killed early on, or like the bumbling detective only shows up at the end and you don't really know what's going to happen. And so when you kind of like get into the nitty gritty of this character's life, and when he's going through very, very scary moments of him tramping through the woods, you're really kind of captivated by his experience. And like the writing that Craig DeLuey does here is so richly detailed. It has this almost poetic atmosphere to it, and it's really, really impactful and really, really good. I think this definitely supersedes just a typical, it's a police procedural, because I know there are plenty of people who do not want that in their horror novels, and that there's some pushback to that. And as like a narrative device, let alone like the cops in general, I do think that this has a very interesting take on exploring policing in some really interesting ways. And this is not a book that's going to be like hoorah for the cops. Like it's a well written tale in all regards. But I do think that this supersedes just calling it a police procedural because it's so well done and you're so engrossed and you're really trying to peel back the layers and figure out what is going to happen near the end of this book. And things that, are normal tropes for a horror movie that you would never think a slasher could get to the point where it would actually scare you, it does here. This book manages to make well-worn tropes extremely scary, and I think that's just super valuable. So yeah, those are a high recommend for the Summer Fun Massacre. I love that both of these books are fantastic, taking very, very different approaches. So you could read them both in a month like I did, and you would still get different aspects of a slasher. Both great reads, and both promise sequels that I really, really cannot wait to read. So yeah, high recommend for both of these. If you've read them or if you're going to read them, please come back and let me know what you thought of them because I would love to hear. So yeah, hope you guys had a good day, and I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.